Hello everyone. Welcome to another session, another episode, The Adventures of Wednesday Night Live. As host, I've been doing this for quite a number of years, and once in a while I give an overview of how we got here, because I find it to be a fascinating lesson in life, and surely relevant to our discussion here this evening, which is about finding renewal. 5 ways to find renewal in your life. And so the background is, as I said, this I think is an inspiration to each of us. Many, many years ago, many, many moons ago, when I was a student and I was working then for the Rabbi, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, my work was to memorize and retain hours and hours of his talks that were delivered on Shabbat and holidays when there were no tape recorders or notes used, and then reconstruct it on paper. So that was the world I was in, which I've shared some memory tips about this a few weeks ago. I'm sure we'll talk about it some more over time. And so a friend of mine called me, and he had a mutual friend that was looking for spiritual inspiration. And I didn't really have time throughout the week, so we decided Thursday night we'll meet up in my office in Brooklyn. And we met. This man, Sonny was his name, came with his friend Michael. And unbeknownst to us all, this would be the beginning of the adventures that I described. This is 1982 to be precise. You know that year? It's a different millennium, and before many wars, personal wars, global wars, and so they came and we had this conversation, informal conversation, and the next week they asked to come back again, and thus began a weekly ritual that, as I said, no one had any plans. We had no idea where it's going to go. They began to bring their friends, and one friend brought another friend. And you are all here today, as anyone that's come to this class, completely word of mouth, never been really advertised. One person linking another person to another person to another person, and I had the great honor to see it all unfold. I'm not the only one. Jeff here is from, I don't like to say old timers, but I think you were 17 years old when I met you, right? 16 years old. And that's in early 80s, 83, 84. You were in the first year already? Wow. Jeff was a son of one of the people that was coming. Anyway, this began, as I said, a journey which has enriched my life, has changed my life, has taught me many, many things. Above all, perhaps, the mysteries of life and existence. And that when you allow yourself to be involved in good things, the greatest things emerge, and you can't really force them. You can't really elicit them. When you do the right thing, you're consistent with it, like water, drops of water that just keep dropping. It will ultimately pierce through any stone, as Rabbi Akiva learned, who became the greatest Talmudic sage. You may know the story. It's also a very inspiring story. He was 40 years old. 40 years old, it's not old. In those days it was old, actually. Life expectancy in the Talmudic times was not what it is today. But especially from a scholarship perspective, he had never studied Torah. He had no relationship with it. And he met a beautiful woman, and they were attracted to each other. And she inspired him to begin to study. But at 40 years old, how do you begin? And you're dealing with Talmudic times. These were great scholars at the time. So this Rabbi Akiva, is clearly not a simple man, was wandering and pondering his situation in the woods, and he came by a waterfall, or a brook of water, and there was some water falling over, and he noticed, in his observation, a stone that had a perfectly hole bored right through the stone, as if someone had drilled a perfect hole. And he was wondering, who would, in the middle of nowhere, how'd that hole come there? As he kept on studying it, he realized that hole, there was drops of water falling through that hole. realized the brook of water, the waterfall, over the years, drop by drop by drop, had pierced a perfect hole through that stone. And that's when he said to himself that if water can do that, drops to a mineral, to an inanimate stone, how much more so to a fertile mind and heart and soul. And that was what finally made him resolve to take her up on it. And he became not only a sage, he became the greatest of them all. Kula liba de Rabbi Akiva, the Talmud says. Everything goes to Rabbi Akiva. His students, 24,000, became the pillars of all the Talmud that we have today. And all midlife and due to certain inspirations, but he went for it. So we can never say the excuse that that we're stuck, that we are unable to find some new hope. Yeah, your present situation may be one that makes you stuck, but maybe some things can be changed. You change certain circumstances. It's cause and effect. And he made that decision, and as I said, he became the great sage. So I don't want to compare it to that, but now we are here in 1982, 30 years later. And I don't even know the real number, maybe 30,000, 35, 40,000 people maybe came through this, not this physical room, but through this metaphorical room, the different rooms we occupied. I know that's not a good word, occupied. There's different rooms that we congregated in, that we gathered in. And it took us from Brooklyn to Manhattan, throughout Manhattan, the Upper West Side many years. Kept on doing it. This was all pre-internet, of course, and pre-anything, actually. I used a typewriter in 1982, for God's sake. It was a real typewriter. You ever seen a typewriter? No, there are no typewriters today, are there? Except in museums. And so I also grew with the technologies, and as the technology allowed itself, we began to broadcast the class, and hence it's being broadcast now. So it's reaching many people I don't even know. And I always hear from people who know me very well, but I don't know them. This is like a one-way mirror, So we're here in tribute to this continuity. I was part of it, but you're all part of it. And I must say that I think that each of us, I say this as a blessing and as a suggestion, that if each of us took a certain same attitude, you start something good, you keep it going. It can be a little class in your home. It can be a different type of get together of people that don't have an agenda, a business meeting or other personal gain, simply to grow and to share notes, compare notes and share life experiences, kindred spirits. You never know what can happen and where that leads you. So here we are, all part of that experience. It would be very interesting, and maybe we'll do that, maybe this year, maybe next, is to maybe get together those 30,000 people. That would be a pretty interesting experiment. And today with internet, you can maybe even get people you can get like short clips. It would be interesting just to see 30,000 people. Most don't even know each other, but some probably, I would recognize almost everybody. I think I don't know if I know everyone's name. Email list didn't begin till the mid-90s, so many people, just came. There was no agenda. We didn't save names. There were no databases. Just recently, we uncovered actually a videotape from 1985 of a class in my home in Brooklyn. I don't think you're there, Jeff, but there's a whole bunch of people there. A lot of people we know when they wore younger men's clothes and younger women's clothes. And I actually put it up on YouTube to get everyone. It's like it's a home video, like an hour and a half. And I look very different, but I listen to myself, and I've been saying the same thing, I guess. So it's like it hasn't bored me, so maybe that's why it's not boring anybody. I guess certain ideas in life deserve to be reviewed. But it's interesting to see, so maybe I'll send out a clip these days. Let me check it out. Anyway, that's the background. But above all, I think it's also a good lesson in the issue that I want to discuss here, which is routines and habits and renewal. If you read today's email that was sent out describing this class, it's a very interesting, most bizarre contrast Everything in this world is part of a process, part of a metamorphosis. Everything. Walk outside, we've had very nice mild weather, but we have the seasons, the natural seasons. It's a process, and it's a process that's completely predictable. You may not be able to predict each day's weather, but what's predictable is that come spring, the trees will begin to bloom, and will last so through summer, and then come autumn, the leaves will begin to fall, and the trees will go into their sleep for the winter, knowing that they will reawaken the next spring. Everything in existence, literally, from mineral, vegetable, animal, goes through these cycles. And in truth, so do we. As children, there's a rhythm to life. That rhythm remains with us. But here's the interesting paradox. One of the greatest traps of human beings is when we get stuck in our routines, in our habits. And as adults, we're constantly looking for ways to ignite our spirits. Things that will awaken our passion. And very often we are trapped in the routines and habits of our lives. We go to work, to the point that we even feel oppressed by these routines. Simply their monotony, they wear us down. And that's why we look for these flights, these ways to, some call it escapism, you can call it carving out time, weekends, for some transcendence, for some relief from the tediousness of the daily grind. And then people do it in all different ways. We do it through romance and love, do it through sexuality, we do it through literature, music, dance, different hobbies that we take on, travel. You all know your so-called interests that help you break out from as I said, the monotone. And those of us that have more creative spirits, or even more free-spirited, need it even more, sometimes desperate. And there are times that we'll even reach out to something that is very unhealthy and destructive. But in the desperate search for some type of relief, we grab whatever comes our way. Just like a thirsty person in an arid desert may drink something destructive or poisonous when you're really thirsty. And as I've often discussed here, many people who are very addictive personalities, who get addicted to things, whatever addiction may be, is a result actually of a very hungry spirit. And people who may be very passionate. Mediocre people don't get that addicted to things. When you're really passionate about something, you're really looking for something, and there's a big void. Nature abhors a void, and so goes our spirit. So we seek, and in our seeking, sometimes the thing that comes to hand is what we grab. And it could end up being very destructive. And this can be in the area of relationships, it can be the area of personal choices, and so on. So here's this bizarre thing. All of nature, all of existence is constantly being renewed. The trees, when they go to sleep in the winter, they don't get bored. They know very well this is now the stage called winter. Now we go to sleep, just like we go to sleep at night. And they will be renewed and rejuvenated come spring. It's little children. We ourselves as children also. Children don't get bored. It's adults that bore children. Adults teach children to become bored. Look at a little child. They can explore nothing. They can just crawl around on the floor and they'll go anywhere. Everything is enchanting to them. They don't need a whole production. Existence itself is enchanting to them. But as we grow into adults, that for some reason, that some internal movement, that mobility, that freedom, that free abandon gets weaker. And just like our arteries get hardened, so do our spirits. And we get trapped in these routines. And the work and so on. Even if you like your work. Who's not had times where you're just absolutely in the doldrums, like, what am I doing with my life? And then we look for things. And today with the internet, it may be easier to find and also easier to get hurt. I mean, most bad relationships are a result of a void. And then, I don't say always desperation, but definitely a need. And something comes your way, hey, you get involved, and then you find out it was not so wise. And then you don't necessarily learn from your mistakes because you haven't really addressed the root of the problem. You just get rid of the guy or the woman. and you find someone else, but this could be the same problem because you're still the same needy person. You still have the same habits. And how often does that happen? And we keep saying to ourselves, how many times can I make the same mistake? So the only anomaly, the only creature on earth that has issues with boredom is us, adults. And I've done some studies on this, no scientific ones. I remember I've shared this with you. You can do your own studies. Traveling sometimes upstate, as a New Yorker, you rarely see animals, except we have cats, the dogs, squirrels, and pigeons. I think that really covers. Of course, I don't want to use the rodent department, but that's basically our repertoire, unless you go to a zoo. I remember when we had a new principal came to our school. So after a year, I asked him, I said, so tell me, do you think you changed things around here? He says, yeah, I turned the jungle into a zoo. I remember that. Still wild animals, except we're like in cages. Fine. So you go sometimes upstate or travel somewhere, and then you see these animals grazing. So I once was traveling upstate, and I see these cows in the field. I just wanted to just check them out. They weren't interested in having a conversation with me, so I had no choice but just to observe. Observant Jew. And I'm observing them. As we all know, the imagery is very clear. They just graze in the meadows. They've got nowhere to go. They've got no plans. Well, maybe they do, but they're not going very far. They're very relaxed. I didn't see any of them that seemed to need therapy. Didn't see anything neurotic about them. I guess they've not been around humans long enough. There are, by the way, today animal therapists, because the homes that they live in are very tense. I know somebody told me that he works he's a veterinarian. He says, and we actually have dogs and cats and other pets that are extremely tense because their homes are filled with tension. It's the humans that cause the animals to be tense. So the animals go for therapy. Well, their owners own them, so they want to calm them down. And when the vet tells them, you're the problem, they think that the animal became the problem. So humans have a way of, screwing up their environments. So anyway, I'm watching these cows, calm, relaxed, and they do the same thing every day. They feed, they breed, they have their children, and they protect their children. Children grow up, train them, and the routine continues. And they seem completely content. What we call, what some poets aspire to, called animal bliss. People aspire to animal bliss. And I can't imagine myself, and most people I know, being relaxed and calm and blissful, just doing what the animals do. So whatever it is, maybe they're wired differently. But I would not, if you had a conversation with any of them, they would not say they're bored. They would say they're content. They're doing what they have to do. Bringing their children into the world, feeding them, and the next generation comes. They have no deeper aspirations. So you could say the human being is different because we have higher aspirations. Actually, even our physiology, we walk upright, so we see more. Most animals walk down with their eyes to the ground, so therefore they see a very small part of the existence. We look up to the heavens and we see this outer space, so we get intrigued. We're curious. Is there life out there? What's out there? And we spend billions of dollars just to satisfy that curiosity. So you could definitely attribute it to the human spirit as different. But we too are part of existence, and we too have, as I said, children are constantly experiencing renewal. And anywhere you look, the lunar cycle, which is very much part of this topic of renewal, because this weekend is the Shabbos, in addition to the weekly routine, the weekly order of reading every week a chapter in the Torah. It's 52 weeks in the year, so every week has its chapter. We read an additional chapter because this is the week that we bless. Well, actually, this weekend, this Shabbos is Rosh Chodesh Nisan. It's the new month, the new moon, the new month of Nisan, which is 2 weeks before Passover. So we read in the Torah an extra chapter. We take out a second Torah scroll. The chapter is called HaChodesh, Parshas HaChodesh. HaChodesh in Hebrew means the month, but it also means the renewal. The word Chodesh in Hebrew, month in English doesn't necessarily mean new. The Chodesh comes from the word Chodesh, new. So a month actually means new, referring to the new moon, which is just an example of how Hebrew is a metaphorical language and words actually mean what they are. You say month, it's a month. Month actually, the root of month is probably from moon, I would assume. But Chodesh in Hebrew means not just moon, it means renewal. The moon is renewed every 30 days, 29 half days. So now we have a new moon called the new moon of Nisan. But this new moon is unique, because even though there are 12 such new moons a year, or 13 in a leap year, but this one's unique because this is the first month of what's considered the Hebrew calendar. Because on this Rosh Chodesh Nisan, 3,324 years ago, exactly, Moses was standing in the streets of Egypt, and it's on that day that God tells him that 2 weeks from now, the Jews will leave Egypt. So we read in the chapter in Exodus, chapter 12, in the Parsha Boy, Vayem Hashem, God speaks to Moses and in Egypt, and to Aaron, and says, HaChedesh hazeh lachem. This new month shall be unto you the beginning of your monthly annual cycle, the beginning of the lunar year. And this renewal will not just be a renewal in the heavens, that the moon will be renewed, but you will be renewed. You will become a new nation, a free nation. So therefore the symbolism of this new moon was unique. And every year we read this on the Shabbos, either that blesses the new month of Nisan, or on the actual Rosh Chodesh Nisan, as it is in this year's schedule. So therefore the message of renewal is obviously more apropos this week than ever, even though it's really a message all year round. But we derive it from this week. So many messages are universal, but there are different times in the year where the focus is on that message, and then we can spills over to the rest of our lives. So renewal is very much part of the theme, part of the energy in the air during this period of time. And renewal in all forms and fashions. So the moon is a perfect example again of the cycles. If you could interview the moon would tell you, my life is very exciting. It's changing all the time. I wax and I wane, and I know that things are never over. Even at the point of extinction, where it seems like I disappear, in other words, the reflection of the moon to the earth, I'm reborn again. And it's called a new moon. It's called a new month. So the moon, even when it's going through the period that is diminishing, it still knows, it's like the trees I mentioned, or like anything in nature, knows it's part of a process. Something happens to us as we turn into adults where we forget about process. We become a bunch of a accumulation of particles, maybe using quantum mechanics language, particles and waves. Is life a wave or is it a particle? Particle would mean that you have a lot of fragments of your life scattered, a lot of dots that are not connected to one another. Wave is a process. When something is a wave, it's a ongoing flow. Children naturally live a life like a wave. Nature is a wave. As we turn into adults, our lives start to become particles. They start to become accumulation of experiences that are like static in a way. Doesn't mean that things don't connect, but our attitude becomes like that. So when something is not going well, we dwell on it and we can become consumed and obsessed with it, and we forget that life is a flow. Tomorrow's a new morning. And we can become so obsessed with an event or a pain in our lives that we don't allow growth to affect us. The exact opposite of nature. Nature will regenerate. Look at forest fires, which some say are necessary for regeneration. You come a little while later, after devastation, the forest learns to regenerate, learns to regrow. I'm not suggesting a fire is a good thing in every situation, but it means it doesn't dwell on the fire, it learns how to grow through it. Now, that doesn't mean we don't know how to learn how to grow, but for some reason, this becomes almost like a renovation. And we need therapists and people to give us advice. The truth is, we are also part of existence in the same way. So what is it that we lose sight of? in appreciating the process of things. And the truth is, the answer is our egos and our need for control and our insecurities and our fears. What they all do to contribute, they all contribute to one thing, that you want to control your life. Instead of allowing to understand that you're part of a flow that you really can't control. You're not going to control your age. You're not going to control the things, the natural growth process, the natural ups and downs of life. Just like an ocean cannot control the ebb and flow, or the moon cannot control the fact. Imagine the moon obsessed. I want to be bright all the time. Now, just for the record, obviously a moon is bright all the time up there. We're talking here a metaphor, how it reflects to Earth. But that's the process. Or a tree says, I want to be in full bloom all year round. It would resist the natural process. It would also become miserable and need a lot of therapy. In nature, because there's no free will and they don't have that ego sense, they don't get in the way, so they all surrender. I wouldn't even say the word surrender. They all accept. This is life. Life is a process. It is we human beings, due to our intelligence and due to our ability to define nature, so we can do it in a great way, but we can also do it in a very destructive way, where we resist the shifts in the flow of life. Now, this doesn't mean we have to accept every negative thing and just make believe it didn't happen. But it means that we are in touch with that electricity that is constantly flowing. And yes, you could see people, even though they're given a new day, they wake up in the morning, they're like zombies. And they're dead based on their experiences of yesterday and the day before. Which means they have essentially retarded or completely impeded the natural growth process. Because they get obsessed with what's happened yesterday or the day before. Now, you could argue, 1 second, so what happens if something painful happens in a person's life? We should just forget about it and make believe like it washes over you? I'm not suggesting that at all. It's part of the process. Maybe that's why a tree has to go into a sleep. Because during that period, the tree has to ponder upon an introspection, so to speak. And maybe that's not a moment of growth. You can't force the issue. Now look how children are developed. It takes 9 months, the gestation period, pregnancy, until we become ready to leave our mother's womb. Imagine a child suddenly gets impatient and says, I want to leave 4 months, I got a lot to do. I don't have another 5 months to wait. Obviously that doesn't work that way. If that happens, God forbid, it's not a healthy thing. You all know the classic story, or I guess metaphor, parable of this fellow that noticed a chrysalis opening up. A caterpillar goes into its cocoon, and then as it goes through its metamorphosis, there comes a point where the chrysalis, the cocoon starts opening up, tearing open like an egg shell. And out is about to come a beautiful butterfly. So this fellow sees the butterfly, which was once a caterpillar, developed the wings and everything else, struggling to get out of the chrysalis, out of the cocoon. So with his great compassion, he goes and cuts open the cocoon. Cuts it open. So this butterfly shouldn't have to struggle any longer. So you'd think, what a benevolent act. Well, unfortunately, actually destroyed the butterfly's life. That butterfly never was able to fly. Why? Because the pressure of the butterfly struggling to get out of the cocoon forces liquid into its wings. That's part of the process, the struggle. And here, he's thinking by trying to get rid of the struggle, it's going to help the butterfly. Instead, the butterfly never had to struggle, so the liquid never got into its wings. So it's a beautiful butterfly, but it's grounded, cannot fly. Classic lesson in some impeding the process. Now, obviously, we all have our struggles in life. We don't need to have additional ones. But the ones that we, for whatever reason, need to go through, you can't really force the issue. Of course, as friends, we try to minimize any type of pain or grief or loss. But there's something we all have to grow through. And it's not just like you cannot speed up the pregnancy process or the butterfly process, the metamorphosis. There's some things that you don't want to speed up. Because if you do, you can end up losing something that you should be gaining in that process. So of course, we're there for each other. If someone suffers trauma or any type of loss, You want to be there for somebody. But you're there for somebody to help support them through the process, not to help stop the process. And sometimes we can do things that are actually destructive because we're compassionate. No different than a mother would not want a child to ever fall, so she'll hold her child's hand, the first steps, and the child will never learn to walk on his own or her own. So a good mother will do this. Encourage the child to walk, but let go. I'm right here for you. If you fall, I'm here to pick you up. So the child gets the confidence and knows that someone's there, but at the same time is allowed to fall, and that falling is necessary, part of the process. A man with money meets a man with experience. They say the man with experience ends up with the money, and the man with the money ends up with the experience. The man with experience ends up with the money, and the man with the money ends up with the experience. Now, hopefully that only happens once, and then once you have the experience, it doesn't happen again. But there are certain things that only experience can teach you. And if any of you have children, or people that are younger than you that you mentor, sometimes you see people that you care for making certain mistakes. And it's not about meddling. Even if you don't want to meddle, you sometimes would like to share with them some shortcuts or some things that you made, mistakes you made and learn from. But some things cannot be said. You could say it, but a person has to go through it. The good news is that most people don't listen anyway, so even if you say it, they're not going to listen. But you get the idea. What do they say? By the time you're old enough to know that your father was right, your children are telling you you're wrong. Okay? This doesn't mean that everything your father said is right. It just means there are some things that fit into that category. So this process is a critical component to really being content in life and experiencing the possibilities of life in the fullest sense of the word. Because how many possibilities do we miss when we're dwelling and not allowing the process to grow? If the caterpillar would dwell on its moments of darkness or months of darkness that it's living in the cocoon, then by the time it starts opening, it may even miss the fact that the sun is rising. So it's a critical element is to know how to go through the process, but also know and always leave open the possibilities that things can be refreshed, can be rejuvenated, reinvigorated. And that's, in a nutshell, the lesson of this week's Parshat HaChodesh. And God actually shows it to Moses with his finger. He points, says, "Achodesh hazeh lachem." This is what it looks like. Because it says Moses was confused when God was telling him this statement about renewal. What was he confused about? It's pretty simple. You don't need to. Any simple person sees the moon. Okay, moon wanes, waxes and wanes, and then it disappears, only to be reborn again. And God was telling, so bless this new moon because it's a symbol of your renewal, the Jewish nation's renewal. Redemption, Passover, and so on. Why was Moses disturbed? So different commentaries, they say, well, he couldn't recognize. You can't even see a new moon. So maybe that was what disturbed him. But I wouldn't say disturbed. What would bother Moses was he understood that this is not just about seeing a new moon. Any astronomer, you don't need an astronomer. We could all look in the skies and the clouds are not there. You see a new moon. You may not see the moment it's born, but you see it, the first glimmers, and then you can see the waxing and the waning of the moon has been documented. Moses was troubled by how do you actually psychologically and emotionally see it through. When you're in a place of a waning moon, when you're in a state where everything is dark, and it seems like all is lost, which was the case of the Jews in Egypt. So even though God is making the promise, how do you really see it? So he wanted God, and he asked God, tell me. So God had to point and say, this is what you're going to see. You're going to see, just as this moon is able to be renewed, human beings have that capacity as well. So God was conveying to Moses a deep truth, the hardest truth of all, which is when we're blind and we cannot see the destination, whatever reason. We're blinded by our pain, or blinded by our myopia, or distractions, or habits. God gave Moses the power and says, I'm giving you the strength to be able to tell the people that you can see something. And you will experience renewal. And ever since we blessed the new moon, that's why we bless the new moon as a result of this. This is a mitzvah. The mitzvah is when every month, the new moon, you shall bless this new moon. You bless it, and you actually say, Shehem asidin l'schadish kameseh, because we, the people, will be renewed just like the moon is renewed. So actually, you can go outside. The night of Passover will be a full moon. Because Passover, as I said, was 2 weeks from Rosh Chodesh. Passover night is always a full moon. So you can actually look at the same moon Moses looked at, because this is the same moon, nothing changed. Yeah, so that's a pretty good, powerful statement, like Hazino Shamayim v'dabera shishma oretz imrefi. God, in a way, the sun and the moon are like witnesses. Those same sun and moon shined for our parents and our grandparents in the worst of times and the best of times. So they're like witnesses of history. And not just, they're actually physical witnesses. They were there. That same moon shined over Egypt that many years ago and was a symbol of their renewal. So we have with us, in nature, an example of our lives. And that's why the Jewish calendar aligns itself with the lunar cycle, because it's trying to teach us, don't lose sight of this process. You too are like a lunar cycle. And even when we grow into adults and we get stuck, as I said, into the particles, in more of a static type of life, the goal is to reconnect to the soul that is going through these cycles all the time. And you see, you can look in the mirror and you can see it. What do you think moods are? Why do you think human beings have moods? I know we may not like the fact that we have moods. We'd like to just have one mood all the time, but that would be pretty monotonous as in itself. Obviously, we'd like to have a happy mood all the time. But moods is a natural process of any life. Just like the seasons have moods, we have moods. It's a sign of change, the sign of growth, movement, mobility. So yes, of course, we'd love to all freeze the best moments of our lives and just be able to spend the rest of our lives right there. It's not how it works. That's maybe a picture. An artificial camera can capture a moment like that. Life is movement. Everything about life is constant movement. And we would not want it any other way. We breathe all the time, exhale and inhale. And the breath of moment before is not enough for the next breath. Our heart beats every moment. Contracts and it expands. And the rest of our spirit is constantly going through movement. It's only that our conscious minds and our conscious lives can turn into the more what we call sedentary type of creatures, called couch potatoes, where you begin to become just live in the moment and slow down and lose touch with that rhythm. So the month of the Chodesh HaZelachem is giving us strength that here's a good time to begin something new. And to realize this renewal is happening all the time, but here's the time of the year where the process begins. And this is like the first of the months. It's not a contradiction to the fact that we celebrate Rosh Hashanah 6 months ago. That's the new year. This is the new lunar cycle. The cycle of renewal. That's more the cycle of nature, and this is the cycle of beyond nature. So the first message, of course, is that no matter who you are, where you are, no matter what's happened to you till this moment, everything is renewed right now, right here again. Based on a concept that the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Hasidic movement, elaborated on, called Perpetual Creation. And it's actually so uncannily similar to some ideas in quantum physics. And that is that existence is not a static existence. It's not a inanimate existence. Everything in existence is being renewed every second anew. The way he puts it is that God is renewing existence perpetually. So even though this table looks like the same table you saw a second ago, there's a renewal process happening as we speak. And it's only our naked eyes can't see that renewal process, just like you can't see subatomic particles. If you were able to see it, you'd see energy. And energy is always flowing. You wouldn't see a table. You would see a bundle of energy, of subatomic particles shooting about, and constantly alive, constantly moving. But on a surface level, that it gels, or it becomes, what's the word I want to say? It solidifies into a solid that looks to us like it's inanimate. Now, if I said this 100 years ago, 150 years ago, people would say, I don't know if they'd lock me up, but they say, okay, some religious fantasies. Today this is basic physics. There's no such thing as inanimate. Matter is energy. That's why matter can be converted into energy. And energy can be converted into matter. So matter is energy, just that we don't see the energy, we only see the shell. We don't see the forces at work beneath the surface. So there's an energy flow that is constantly pulsating in a rhythm all the time. Generally it's a rhythm that consists of tension and resolution, like the heart and like the breath, in and out, like a pump. It contracts and it expands. That's how energy flows. You pull back and then you draw, like a bow and arrow. The farther back you arch backwards, the farther forward will be the shot. And in life that's also the same way. The greatest things take time to prepare. Like they say, if it's built overnight, it'll die overnight. You build it over time, then it can sustain, it becomes enduring. But anything enduring takes time to build that way. So during the building process or during the planning process, you may not see movement, but that's the biggest movement at all. That's creating the solidity and the security of something that will last for a long time. This is true in relationships, especially. Two people meet each other, what they call fall in love, which itself is a nice word. Maybe it comes from movies and books. Fall in love. Yeah, maybe they're affectionate to each other. Maybe they like each other. You see people fall in love, and then 2 years from later, they're in the ugliest fight in court. What happened to the love? So maybe love should be more seen like a process. Just like you plant a seed in the ground, and over the years you water it and nurture it, it grows into a beautiful tree. So you could say it's a seed. Two people can plant a seed together. If they'll nurture it, and they'll water it, and they'll commit to each other, and they'll do the details of life together, the things that are not so dramatic, no fireworks, and will stick through it, then there comes a point where they are a tree. And that you can call real love. Because that has proven, time-tested, it's gone through real life. The early stages is the seed of love. So it's just an interesting way of also looking. It's just an example. You talk about process and particles and waves. Love is a wave, not a particle. But we live in a fast food society. We want to press buttons and we want to get our results. So we fall in love. And then we expect everything. And then it doesn't usually work. And we're disappointed. Maybe that's not how we should look at it. Maybe we should look at it just like planting a tree. You commit it, you nurture it, and you build it together, then it will yield its fruit. And just like you can't force a tree growing, you can't force love to become a tree overnight. It doesn't work that way. It's just the opposite of nature. But we live in a world, as I said, we want control, we want to have instant gratification, we want instant results. Especially in the accelerated age of technology. So that may be good for search engines. But relationships, anything that's real, love, truth, knowledge, God, soul, is all part of a process and always emerges. It never can be just bought. And this is consistent. And try to find one thing that is really enduring and meaningful that it can be gotten in a moment. And it's not part of a process. And not part of ups and downs. And just like the tree goes through its seasons, even while it's a seed in the ground, it also goes through its seasons. Same as with all real experiences in life. So, I don't like the word surrender, but accepting that is a critical component and not fighting it. Excuse me. Now, of course, there are things we could try to accelerate and speed up, and sometimes people procrastinate. Procrastination is also one of these static things we do. No, in the wild, nature does not procrastinate. When the moon has to be renewed, it gets renewed. There's no such thing as I'm not doing it today, I'm doing it tomorrow. Humans can procrastinate. So of course there's definitely situations where we can try to speed things up and not let people get stuck. But it's all part of a longer, bigger process. And again, the moon is the best metaphor, the best example for it. Some say that women are in touch with this more than men, simply biologically, physically they're more in touch with the time and cycles and so on. It may be true. Even without in their psyche. Whereas men can be much more focused and try to control the environment, You just walk outside in the streets of New York, and the only thing natural is the sky, basically, right? And which, if you can see it between some of the buildings. So everything is man-made. The concrete, the streets, the subways, the buses, obviously the buildings, everything occupying these buildings. And if you stop and think about it, I was just yesterday walking in Manhattan. I mean, I grew up here, so it's not like a novelty in Manhattan. I know what Manhattan is like. But I decided deliberately, because I'm so used to it, just to stop, and I was looking around. I was saying, and look at the millions of people milling about. Their basically lives are controlled by man-made things. And man-made things are absolutely dead and static. It's only God's world that is always moving about. As I said, nature, the moon, the sun. But buildings are standing. Actually, as a matter of fact, you don't want them moving around. That would not be, So I understand the benefit of it, but our minds and our psyches and our entire being has become trained. We change who we are. We're not in nature. We're not aligned with real rhythms. We created artificial realities. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not suggesting we flatten it all and go back to the wilderness. There's certain human beings have tamed the elements. We built civilizations, but at a great expense. The best would be the best of both worlds. Build all these things, but remain personally driven by rhythm. But our rhythms are completely artificial. They're based on the news we read, the shows we watch, Wall Street and its ups and downs. If you look at all the rhythms and cycles we identify with, consciously, I'm not talking about naturally, they're all man-made, they're all artificial. And it affects our moods, and it affects our, like when certain television shows stop, some people just for months, if not years, devastates them. Certain soap operas. You live vicariously through other people's lives. Football season ends. It's very depressing for some. Many. But then there's because the baseball season is coming. So don't worry about it. And if it's not the baseball season, it's spring training. And then there's, of course, the trade season. So there's always something to keep you busy with. I'm not trying to be sarcastic about all types of entertainment. I don't think they're necessarily evil. But don't ever underestimate that we are essentially giving our lives to another rhythm that's not our own. And then who defines what is love and what's relationships? We pick it up from what we see. Social environment, from peer pressure, like the blind leading the blind. So the producers on TV saying, well, we keep stooping to lower common denominators in our programming because that's what people want. And therefore that's what advertisers want. The people say, we want it because that's what you're giving us. So we're in this vicious cycle, everyone's blaming everybody. And meanwhile, they're raking in the money and the denominator keeps lowering. And everybody's just blind leading the blind. Maybe that's why Mordechai wouldn't bow to Haman. And why Jews didn't bow to man-made creatures or structures, because we want to stay in touch with the natural rhythms of life. And then suddenly, in contrast, and as I was standing and pondering the streets of Manhattan, which you can just do and nobody really can tell anyway, because everybody's weird, so I'm just looking at the buildings. I may, for all purposes, be, a tourist. Tourists, they look at the buildings, Manhattan. And then I was thinking about my grandchildren who are in California and one in here in New York. And if they were right here with me, they would be distracted like everybody's distracted by all the hoo-ha. But they don't need it for their excitement. They go about, as I said, they crawl around on the floor and just be excited by nothing. And you can really see, you could even visualize and see how a live human being, it becomes dead. I don't mean physically dead, I mean spiritually dead. I say completely dead, but deadened. So we're reminded with all these modern innovations of the moon is renewed, and so are we. And all these artificial and man-made objects, technology, all they are tools. It's a sophisticated tool chest, that's all it is. But don't ever think that's the harbinger and the barometer of what is reality. This is not the standard of reality. This is humans in their innovation have figured out how to make our lives more comfortable. But it's like, imagine the artist starting to worship the instruments or the carpenter starting to worship his tools. The tools are tools. And they're supposed to be tools to human beings who are supposed to be alive and constantly experiencing renewal. Then the tools are excellent. They help the renewal process. But if the tools suddenly become our reality and what we depend upon, and your schedule is defined by which television shows you watch, or where you're going to travel, or other things like that, then the question is, who's the master, who's the slave? So, this new month is meant to bring out that type of freshness and renewal within our lives. And the first thing, just to think about, who's in control. Who is in control of your rhythms? Now it's interesting because once you're already entrapped in that place, it's very difficult when you have a problem to suddenly say, okay, how do I deal with the problem? Because it could be your whole life circumstances is the problem. I don't mean to be so harsh. Not that all of it is a problem, but it means that your whole mindset. And you're looking like it's like somebody who's maybe in prison, and then something happens that's not good, and they say, okay, what do I do? They say, well, first we got to get you out of prison, and then we won't have these problems. But we want to have the solutions based on the circumstances. It's like we want nothing to change, but we want something to change that's making us uncomfortable. As they say in healing, if nothing changes, nothing changes. It's brilliant, right? But that's what they say. What is insanity? People who do the same thing want different results. Excuse me. So we have plenty of reminders in nature and the moon and so on of this renewal, but the challenge is how we apply it to our lives. So I want to go through, in the spirit of what I've been doing the last few months, some actual practices, exercises. This time I don't really have a good acronym for it. I couldn't come up with an acronym, but it's definitely 5 methods. And I think if each of us, this season of renewal and this season of redemption, would implement it. So in addition to obviously the traditions of the Passover Seder and everything that comes with, the key is to make it relevant to our lives. I will be doing a pre-Passover workshop the week before Pesach, Wednesday before Passover. So I'll there discuss more in detail how Passover traditions and rituals in the Seder can be tools for such renewal, which of course itself is a renewal thing, refreshing, because most people see the rituals as being very static, and we do it out of tradition, nostalgia, guilt, whatever it may be. In truth, these are actually tools how to access the soul's power of regeneration. Okay. So these are the 5 suggestions or methods, tools, ways. Before I get into the details, they're all based on the principle I've been discussing, which I'm going to sum up now, is that here's what's going on. Everything in nature, including ourselves, naturally is part of a metamorphosis. A process that, just like the seasons, goes through its ebb and flow, waxing and waning, birth, growth, certain aging process, withering even, but then rebirth. Everything in existence is that way. But something aborts or somewhat distorts the process in our lives. So even though internally we may be going through those changes, but on the external level, things start slowing down. So think of it like this. Think of it like, imagine the seasons going through this changes, the sea flowing, but on the outer level something gets frozen, and it becomes inconsistent with what's going on below. So below, you have these rushing energies, you have dynamic, pulsating rhythms, and on the outer level things slow down slower, slower, and slower. So you really have a misalignment going on. And the challenge is, how do we realign that static surface to the dynamic inner force? In a way, you could even look at nature as an example, give an example for it. We know today that the Earth's core, is molten fire. Such extent, heat and fire, that nobody could survive there. And yet, if it didn't exist, we wouldn't be alive today. We know the sun, for example, is the same thing. It has to be a certain distance from Earth. It would be a little farther, we would freeze. It'd be a little closer, we would burn up. So beneath the surface of the Earth, just like within this table and every object, there's a dynamic subatomic particles that are constantly flowing and never sleep. And then when you travel outward, and with the naked eye, all you see is a surface that seems so quiet. But we should never think it's quiet. The same thing in our case. But in our case, the problem is we actually convince ourselves and we live in this more static type of fashion. You know, people say, I'm slowing down. You get older, I retire and I slow down. Now, there's nothing wrong, and it's very much part of the natural process that we age. And obviously, strengths we may have had when we're 20, we're not going to have when we're 80. But you know, there are other strengths that we have at 80, you don't have at 20. You have a certain wisdom, experience, seasoning, less ego, perspective. But we don't worship those things. We worship youth. We worship, again, the thing that's apparent to the eye. And that's why we don't respect the elderly. How much brain power and knowledge and experience, how many mistakes are being made by younger people, and they just tap the mind, the brain trust of the elderly. Instead, we dismiss them to golf clubs and to, not golf clubs, golf courses, using golf clubs. Just look at television, especially, well, anytime, look at the advertising. Slowly the percentage of advertising is geared toward the elderly. I don't know if you're getting AARP yet. Well, I know most of us don't acknowledge when we start getting it, because it tells you what age you are. Around 48 you start getting it. And then they say you usually resist for 5 to 10 years, and then you just succumb, like it is with reading glasses and a whole bunch of other elements. So you could just see society, what society is all about. In truth, if you look in the Torah, the elderly are the ones that are most respected. The sages, the Skanim, they're called. Actually, elderly is a compliment. Zaken, Zeshakana Chachma. Zaken, which means an elderly person, is Zeshakana Chachma, the one that acquired wisdom. That's what a Zaken is called. Ask most people, what do you think about the elderly? You know, they'll say, a nuisance, but we have to tolerate it. Social Security, Medicare. And it's true that I'm not saying there aren't certain needs for the elderly, but it just also shows you what we value. Even when it comes to Passover, Shal avicha v'yagetcha, ask your father, your parents, and they will tell you. Shal zkenecha, ask your grandfather. The whole idea of the Seder is seeing the generational passing of the tradition from the father, the parents, the grandparents, the nachas, the give and take. So yes, it's educating the younger generation, but with the wisdom and experience of those that came before us. And that itself is a sign of process. We're not an island unto ourselves. There's no nation, there's no generation that's just an isolated element. We're a link in a chain. We're midgets that stand on the shoulders of giants. When it comes to knowledge, everybody understands that. The knowledge is meant to be accumulative. We're not self-made. The greatest knowledge is the one that's built on previous knowledge and lets you go and see more, like a midget on the shoulder of a giant. So you have everything the giant has, and then you have the additional element that you have. But if you get over the shoulder, you're back to, you'll see much less than those before us have seen. So the process is also in that generational element. So how do we align that outer and the inner? If the soul is a vibrating force, a throbbing energy, always alive, just like we breathe and our heart is beating, how do we pierce the layers and allow us to access it just like a newborn child or a young child exploring with enchantment the universe? So there are things we have to do, because it's not just going to happen. It's not just you're going to wake up one morning and say, you know what, that was a nice thought Rabbi Jacobson said, maybe I should start looking at things differently. Because you have a forces that are working against it. You have your routines that you're trapped in. You got to go to work that day. You have people expecting things. You've already created a whole life of habits And very difficult to break out and say, oh, I'm just going to stop it all. Yeah, we could go on vacation for a week or two. Some people do actually break away and just start something new. Out of desperation, doesn't mean they actually start something new. They just start maybe the same thing again, just in another place. How do you qualitatively change that? You have to do something besides just a mindset. You can look at the moon and meditate on it and get the lessons. But you have to do something in your life, action. So that's the 5 methods that I was going to suggest. And in truth, you can probably find other ones. These are not etched in stone. But these are, I believe, practical ones that everybody can do. You commit to it and you do it. And here they are. First thing, find a new friend. Simple as that. A new friend that you've not had till now. You know, we have friends. Some people say, I have enough friends, I don't need new ones. No, that's the reason you need new ones. If you have enough, that's why you need a new one. You know, I don't mean a new Facebook friend. That's easy to... that's very simple. I mean a real friend. Now, do they become friends overnight? No, but find someone new. Someone that gives you, that you can trust, that gives you confidence, you can give them something. In other words, don't trap yourself in the illusion that I already have my social circles all developed, and that's it, I have no more time for anybody else. Bring someone new into your life. Friend, I'm not even talking about necessarily a complex relationship. Someone that's a friend, that obviously you want someone that's not going to demoralize you, but someone that is going to help, may bring a smile to your face. And if you don't think of it in terms of a romantic or any other threatening situation, it can be quite simple. It's a friend. You all have probably potential people that can be that way, and maybe just follow up. Call them and say, let's go for a coffee or tea. So in this season, bring someone new into your life. As I often mention, there are many people in our lives. You go through your Rolodex, or whatever you call your contact management list. Many of those people, you know that if you get enthusiastic about something, you rest assured you call them, they will make sure to remind you that you shouldn't get too excited about anything. And that they, don't get your hopes up. Basically dash any type of dreams or expectations we may have. There are people who are very good at that. So I'm not suggesting drop them all, but bring a friend in that gives you belief in yourself and hope. And I don't just mean in a selfish way. It could be reciprocal, real type of new friendship. So that's suggestion number 1. Suggestion number 2 is take on a new commitment. A new commitment. This can be a small thing, it can be a big thing. Obviously something that you will keep to. So I'd rather see something small that you keep to than something big that you're going to drop. So something, a commitment. It can be a mitzvah, it can be charity, it can be volunteerism. Actually, that's going to be the 5th, so I won't use that. Volunteer, it's not that. Let's not use that. It can be maybe once a month hosting something in your house, maybe creating a little circle of friends, book club. I mean, there's many, many, many things that can be done. Commitment could be with someone else, which always makes it easier because then you compel each other. But a new commitment. And again, don't do something that, like one of these New Year resolutions that lasts from January 1st to January 2nd. Or by Jews we say from Esther Tanis to Purim, which is also one day. That's the second thing. The third thing is to join a new class. Some type of study. It could be Torah study, it could be other spiritual study, but something that, of course, is meaningful to you. Now, all these things I'm talking about should be done with, of course, with joy, not as some type of obligation. Recognizing the importance of it. I'll elaborate a little more when I finish all 5. The fourth thing is volunteer. Volunteer for something. I mean, I know you can combine that with the commitment part. Fine, if you want to cut it to 4, so be it. But hey, my point of view is the more you bring into your life, the better. So might as well keep it separate. And remember, you're not doing it for me; you're doing it for yourself. So volunteer for something. This can be there's plenty of opportunities to volunteer. It's going to be something in the health field, working with children, needy children, offer to babysit for some family that may need it. Once a week. It doesn't have to be overwhelming. It can be an hour, it can be a half hour. The issue here is not necessarily to disrupt your whole life, because then you're not going to end up doing it. And I specifically, like, getting a new friend is not necessarily a large time investment. Volunteer, obviously, takes some time, whatever it may be. Now you can also volunteer online. You can volunteer on the phone. I know people who have this thing today, like what they call the chavrusas, where people study with each other on the phone. You don't have to necessarily be most knowledgeable. You study, you find a partner. So it can be things that you can do from the comfort of your home. And finally, the fifth thing, which maybe is the hardest one, not to make it all easy. I mean, they're all, on my point of view, both all easy and hard. It's easy if you do it. It's hard when you don't. The fifth is, let's call it letting go. Letting go of something. What do I mean by that? It's very hard to, as I said, cold turkey, just change your life. But when the Jews left Egypt, they had to let go of something. They had to let go of a routine that had controlled their lives for 210 years. And it affected them. That's why when the moment came for them to leave Egypt, God said, not 1 second extra, leave immediately. You think, 1 second, 210 years, what's the rush? You didn't rush till now. Because when time comes, you make the complete break. An opportunity comes, don't hang around. And it's one of the hardest things to do, is to let go of something. Obviously, I'm talking about letting go of something not good or unhealthy. Letting go could also be a mindset. We sometimes convince ourselves that we must have something. And if I don't have it, my whole life will change. If you look at people who have successful diets, and I don't mean a diet, one of these gimmicks, but the real ones that are sustainable and lasting, or anything of that type of nature where they change something in their life, you'll find very often a common factor, which is not spoken about a lot, is a person at some point made a decision, maybe because they saw something, maybe because they thought about it, maybe they just became conscious of it, that they can live without certain things, certain rituals, let's say food rituals people have, and then they realize I don't have to have it, because part of what routines and habits, what they do. There's recently a book out about it, a book about the power of habit. I think I forgot what it's called. Quite a good book. Makes a very critical point there. The mind, like any good machine, prioritizes. That when you are able to memorize and do something by habit without putting too much attention, the mind always gravitates to that. So it can use most of its energy and focus on new things. So for example, how much of your mind is being occupied in the morning when you shower or brush your teeth or go through your morning rituals? So the mind gives very little to it, because now it's become a habit. I almost don't think about it. How often do you sometimes do something and then you think, did I do it or I didn't do it? But your habit did it. So then you say, yeah, of course I did it. Obviously we could be forgetful. And this is really an efficient way for the mind to use its energy. Say, why do I have to focus and put all my brain energy into brushing my teeth? You know how to do that already. So it gives it like minimal resources to this part of the hard drive, so it can focus on gathering a new information. So in that context, it's actually a very efficient system. The trap of that is that if you get trapped in a bad habit, it's so much part of your being that you can't get rid of it, because the mind doesn't even give thought to it. So the critical thing is to be able to go to that point of what they call the trigger, that suddenly says, one second, maybe I don't need that in my life. And then when you start trying to not have it, you realize, hey, it's not that necessary. Now some habits are very difficult to break, but some are not so difficult. Sometimes you need a wake-up call. But the key thing is you have to know you're not necessarily a creature of habit, even though we all have habits that are healthy. Because as I said, if we had to focus on every habit that we do, every good habit, we wouldn't have time to absorb new experiences. So letting go is a type of looking at something that maybe you never really thought about, or or maybe you haven't thought it was too formidable, and let go of it. As I said, it begins with the mind. It doesn't begin with the habit itself. It's the mind that thinks that you must have it. Of course, again, I spoke about something that's not necessarily healthy. So this is maybe a more complicated one because you have to give it some thought. What exactly should you let go of? But hey, you're all intelligent people, and I'm sure you'll figure out something. If you need some assistance, I'm more than happy to discuss it with anybody. But these are the 5 that I gave some thought to, and obviously I talk from experience. I realize that doing it myself, I see the effect it has. So in the case of friends, thank God, I've been blessed to constantly have new friends. And again, not casual, but I meet people all the time, and I happen to like people, so I'm always meeting new experiences. So I've seen its effect. I'm not suggesting to do this to become a social animal here. I'm talking about finding one friend. Passover comes, many of us go to a Seder. There's good opportunity. You sometimes go to a new place, or people come to where you are, and you meet new people. It's a good opportunity to forge a new bond. And the same with others. I give classes myself, but I also recently began to learn and commit to learning certain new ideas, new books, and so on. And as much as I feel rejuvenated, I don't feel monotony in my life, but these things, they bring new life. And as much as life you have, you could always use more. Because everything can become a routine. Even your excitement can become a routine. And the same with the other 3. The friend, I just said the friend, the commitment. So I made a commitment this year to make some trouble. Good trouble. Time to take some risks, and time to go out on the limb and try to create some revolution in the air. I was inspired by many things, but one thing is that line from Steve Jobs that said that those that are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones that do. So I know it could be a good bumper sticker and a greeting card and a cliche, but it could also be real. So you'll hear some noise from me more than you've heard, hopefully. I'm trying to stick to the commitment to do it, not to talk about it. So that's a key element, because talking can sometimes release the energy that I spoke about it. Like they say, there are 2 people who never change. These are speakers and writers. Being someone that does both, I'm double trap here. Now, why don't they change? Because every time they hear something inspiring that may be a catalyst for change, instead of changing, they say, great material for my next speech. Great material for my next book, my next article. So they release the excitement into passing it on to others instead of applying it to yourself. So that's in the Yiddish expression. They say, amagid, people who are orators, don't have any hope for tshuva, for return and for repentance, because they're always busy using any inspiration to give to others instead of to themselves. So that's a particular challenge, but that too, if you know about it, half the cure of an illness is awareness. It also helps the process. So commitment is the 3rd. The 4th was volunteering. Well, it's been imposed upon me more than one way that I have to volunteer for certain things, because people come to me for different assistance, and I do not take money for helping people. If people want to make a donation to my organization, that's fine, but not everybody can or wants to, and so on. So I've been thrust into a situation. I'm just sharing that. I'm not just preaching to you. Whatever I told you, I take upon myself as well in this new month. And finally, the letting go. So that I would rather not talk about in public right now. That's more for a group therapy session. For all sharing, then I'll also share. So I have the prerogative. Not because I'm embarrassed or anything. It's just some things you want to keep to. I want to preserve their so-called anonymity, confidentiality. But I did begin playing tennis recently, 9 months ago. So that has been pretty good. And I've been playing through outdoors, even in the cold winter. Even the 18-degree weather, there wasn't much of it this winter, but there was a few days like that. It's actually quite exhilarating. Anyway, I'm not here to give a confessional. I just wanted to share with you that I've tested some of these ideas before I suggest to others. I injected myself with this before I prescribe it. But I personally think that if you do it, you'll see real change in your life. And I specifically chose things that are not dramatic, like major things, because I'm a big believer that you change things in the small level. Small breeds large. You start shooting for the top. Tafasta meruba loy tafasta. You start grabbing, trying to chew off more than you can, bite off more than you can chew. You end up not getting anywhere. Usually there's setbacks, and then you get disappointed, and that definitely doesn't work. So this is the Meaningful Life Center, Simon Jacobson's concoction for the week. This potion of the 5 suggestions. And as I said, I tried hard to figure out an acronym to make them easy to remember, but I couldn't unless I have to change all those words. A V and a C and a C and L and what was the other one? 3 C's actually. So there were no. Anyway, so if you come up with some ideas, it's always nice to have acronyms. That's part of the humor part. So in this season of renewal, in the season of Passover, redemption, it's not just a ritualistic commemoration of things that happened thousands of years ago. It's about renewal in our lives today. And each of us is capable of it, but you have to act on it. Because you have to remember, the outer layer, as we speak, gets harder and harder. The crust hardens. And the more it hardens, the more misaligned it becomes with the forces that are moving beneath the surface. And that's something we can do. We can change. We live in a world that is definitely teaches us about static life. I understand there's a lot of mobility and there's frequent flyer miles and all that stuff, but don't confuse that with movement. That's just simply flying a lot. Movement means true movement. The ability to change, the ability to see things differently, the ability not to be trapped by stereotypes and preconceived notions. It's not so common today. When they say to think out of the box, it's a lovely line. Now it's think out of the bun. Who's that? Taco Bell or somebody, right? So even that they turned into a marketing campaign, because everyone loves thinking out of the box. But if everybody was thinking out of the box, I'd probably have a different type of world, wouldn't you think so? And then, as others like to point out, you have to have a box first before you think out of the box. There's some people very good thinking out of the box, but there's no box to talk about. So, what box are you referring to? What structure exactly do you have before you tell me about beyond structure? Like we have an expression about Purim, it says to get intoxicated, to drink to the point that you cannot, ad lo yada, till you cannot distinguish, till you cannot perceive the difference between things. So someone once got drunk, and he was told by a Rabbi, he said, listen, first you have to have knowledge before you go beyond knowledge. So first you have to have perception before you get to a point of no perception. So a lot of people reach a point of no perception, but they didn't have no perception. And that's a critical element as well. You have to have a structure if you want to transcend structure. And you see this with great musicians and great artists. They know the structure very well. And that's why they know how to transcend it. So, the point is, it's not that easy to just get out of this trap. And we are social creatures. That's the fact. We are impacted in more ways than we can ever imagine by everything around us. The subliminal messages, marketers, advertisers, friends, peer pressure. I mean, it's very easy to read up. There are, they call them street teams, busy figuring out how to change your mind, how to get you to buy something, how to plant something in your mind that is indispensable. Coca-Cola is a great example, the #1 brand on earth. You ask people who drink Coke all the time. First of all, to them it's a habit that is not even seen as a habit. It's not considered an addiction, not a drug or alcohol. Whatever the ingredients in there that keep you trapped, not proven medically to be destructive, even though you have all these anti-Coke stuff, like you put a penny in a can of Coke, and they come back like in a few days it'll corrode, and Coke is used by mechanics to clean rust and stuff like that. But still, billions of people drinking Coke. And if you ask people, it's like so innocent. They'll say, it's like natural to them, like water. I can't have a hot dog without a Coke. And certain foods you associate immediately without even thinking. Back to the trigger. It's become habit. Automatically, certain food, it's a Coke. I know, some of you are not Coke, Pepsi, whatever it may be. And some of us don't drink any of that. But many do. And it's not necessarily some type of conspiracy. They're making a lot of money. I think it's Warren Buffett's first choice of guaranteed profit, because it shows you how what kind of people we are. I'm using more of a study in human beings. It means it's very easy to get us to become trapped in something that we don't even need. Completely unnecessary drink. Doesn't have any nutrients, no value. Doesn't even promise value. These drinks that promise you drink it in the morning, you get 65 vitamins in it. Whatever, if it's true or not, I don't even know. The Coke doesn't even promise that. Yet it says refreshing. And the colors, and it looks like, Christmas season, you got sounds like the holiday spirit. It's excellent, great marketing. But it's a classic example of something that is completely antithetical to real life. And the younger the child you can get them addicted to it, they're going to drink Coke the rest of their lives. That's why so much advertising in amusement parks and everything where children hang around. But then I look at children, the pre-Coke children, if you can call them that. They haven't drunk Coke yet because they don't drink soda yet. And there's nothing missing in their lives. But they will soon be told that something's missing. But it won't be told like that. It will be made pleasant. This is what you do. It's refreshing. We all know the more Coke you drink, actually, the more thirsty you get. It doesn't refresh very well as well. Now, I'm not trying to come out. I hope I'm not going to be sued by Coke for... I don't think I'm that important. And this is not necessarily being seen by enough people to get their attention. But which is good from my point of view, so it's under the radar. But it forever, posterity will be seen on the internet that here was a man that stood up to the great Coca-Cola. Anyway, and I've been guilty of drinking it as well. I don't feel addicted to it. I'm perfectly fine with nice cold seltzer or water. But you get the idea. And there are millions of little things like this that we don't even think about, that we're doing, that are all part of, and again, these are the worst part of it. They're not necessarily destructive forces. I'm not talking about things we do that are absolutely destructive. But there are little nuanced things that are so innocuous but they're constantly, what they're doing is not allowing our bubbly spirit and our energies and our chidush, our innovative part, to flow, because we become trapped in this habit, that habit, this routine, that routine. So I hope my 5 suggestions could help break the hold of the routines by just introducing new things. I wouldn't go to war against your routines. Impossible. Because your routines have a big hold on you. It's almost impossible. But you could introduce, you can make cracks in the armor. And one is a new friend, as I said, a new commitment, a new class, volunteer, and letting go of something. Maybe it's Coca-Cola. That usually most people let go through due to health reasons. That's usually the motivation. Health, who needs that in my system, and especially diet, Coke with all its chemicals, etc., etc. But Coke was just an example, and I did nothing personal. It's just an example of society. So, with that being said, we are entering into this HaChodesh season. This Shabbos is the Rosh Chodesh season, the new moon, as well as reading this Parshas HaChodesh, which when you read the chapter in the Torah, it, as I said, that's the energy in the air, the vibe, the ability to, and if we create a container, a channel, we can take advantage of this new energy. So even though, as I said, the perpetual renewal is all the time, but there are times in the year where there are less resistance, where there are more openings. And this is one of them, this season. And it all leads up to, of course, the great Pesach, Passover, which we shall discuss in the next 2 weeks, 2 more classes before Pesach. And is it 2 more classes? Yeah, next Wednesday and the following Wednesday. And as I said, I'll have a pre-Passover workshop, talk more about the Seder. But meanwhile, I want to wish everyone we already do wish 30 days before the holiday, we already begin to prepare. Wish everybody a redemptive and renewal in our lives. But the more you do, the more God reciprocates. The more containers you create, the more channels there are for the blessings to manifest. So everyone should have that type of beautiful season, maybe a new beginning in your life. And you do it with small little steps, and then a person purifies, sanctifies themselves below a little, so they give them a lot more sanctity from above. It's all proportionate to our efforts. And that this season and this year should be a blessed year for everyone. I want to wish Mazel Tov to a good friend who used to come to this class a lot and has worked with the Meaningful Life Center in Neria, Cohen, who's engaged to be married. Yeah. And after Mark Belinsky. So these are some people who I've been praying for many years. And so I'm seeing miracles in my own life. Seeing some people that I can't say I never give up hope, but it's good to see that they made a move. So that means if they could, anyone can. And I don't mean that in any negative way. I just mean to say that it's inspiring. And so I wish everyone here, those that have to find their soulmate, maybe this is this beginning that we're talking about, the newness, a new attitude, a new approach. Get away from the static routines that trap us so often. And the blessings in every particular way, whether it's new openings in Parnassa, making a livelihood, or new openings in health, or new openings in our own psychological blocks and the things that impede us from getting where we need to get. So this is an excellent season to begin. So everyone should be blessed in that way, each of you individually in your particular way. This isn't just a collective blessing, it's meant to be specific to every person in their particular, tailored to your particular needs. And so I dedicate the class to Nuria and her groom. And if anybody here has any simchas to share, I'd be happy to recognize that and to dedicate a class to that as well. Philip will be giving his. Is not. Oh, okay. Philip will not be giving his class tomorrow night. And again, if you please leave your email address with us if you haven't, so we can stay in touch. And see myself and Velvel and our entire team in Meaningful Life Center as renewal resources, let's call it that way. Resources for renewing and refreshing your life. And I think it's a great blessing to be able to know that you're not trapped by yesterday, you're not a victim of circumstances, you're not trapped in any way. Everything is ahead, everything is possible. Thank you very much. I do want